So I want to introduce Sarah Hernick. She's our speaker and our host today. She'll be giving the presentation. She's an educator in the Pesticide Safety Education Program. Sort of the behind the scene host is Maria Alfaro. Currently she's out of power because of PG&E turned off the power because of all the winds. So we're hoping that she's not, that she's safe and sound. She's sort of monitoring email to see what's going on, but it's really not practical for her to be on the webinar. So sorry about that. And so now you're stuck with me as the co-host and the technical support. I'm Lisa Blecker. I'm the Pesticide Safety Education Program Coordinator. That's really all you need to know about me. Next slide. So you can contact us at pesticidesafety@ucanr.edu. The whole team will get that email. And then we're also on Twitter, or at least one of us is on Twitter.
Neither of us on the call today.
Not me. Pesticide Safety UC, and we communicate about our webinars and on that venue.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so as Lisa said earlier, my name is Sarah Hernick. I'm an educator with the Pesticide Safety Education Program. I work with Lisa and Maria, and unfortunately, Maria can't be here with us today for circumstances that are out of her control. But so yeah, I will be giving the presentation today. And, like Lisa said, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. If you have any tech questions, send them in the chat to Lisa. And I'm, obviously giving the presentation. So if you send me a private message, I may not respond right away. So it might be best to send Lisa that private message if you are having tech issues or any other concerns. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into the presentation. So today, the presentation is about pesticide storage, transport, and disposal. And so just this quick slide gives an overview of what we're going to talk about today of, how to store pesticides safely, how to transport them safely, how to triple rinse and dispose of your pesticide containers, and also how to dispose of any unused or outdated pesticides that you might have in your possession. So to get us started right off the bat, we're going to launch another poll, and we'll just wait for that to pop up really fast. Perfect. So the poll question is, what is the minimum required PPE or personal protective equipment for pesticide handlers in the state of California? And you can choose all that apply. So we have chemical resistant gloves, a respirator, hat, long pants, long sleeve shirt, closed-toed shoes, socks, protective eyewear, and a chemical resistant suit. So again, what is the minimum PPE for pesticide handlers in the state of California? And you can choose all of the answers that you think apply to that question. So yes, so most of you said chemical resistant gloves, long sleeve shirt, long pants, closed-toed shoes, socks, protective eyewear. That is correct. So I'm going to go back to this slide really fast. So yeah, so in California, the minimum PPE that pesticide handlers are required to wear are chemical resistant gloves, long pants, long sleeve shirt, closed-toed shoes, socks, and protective eyewear. So here we go. Here is Miguel. So I'm not sure, some of you may already know him from past PSEP webinars, but he is the example of the federal requirements. So federally, you're required to have a long sleeve shirt, long pants, closed-toed shoes, and socks. But in California, we like to protect our pesticide handlers a little bit more, and we require the chemical resistant gloves and the eyewear. Okay, so I'm sure you're probably wondering, I just said we're talking about pesticide storage, transport, and disposal, and so you're probably wondering, why are we talking about PPE? Because your safety is always important, especially when dealing with pesticides, right? And so when you're storing, when you're transporting pesticides, that's also considering handling pesticides. And so you must always wear the PPE required by the label when you're handling it, to also wear that PPE when you're storing it and when you're transporting it. And it might seem kind of silly, but accidents tend to happen when we're transporting or we're storing because, we're comfortable, or it's the end of the day and we're like, I just want to get it done with, and you're racing to put it all away, and you might spill on yourself or spill on someone else, or some accident could happen. And so we require you, even if you're not spraying or applying it, you still need to be wearing that minimum PPE when you're storing and transporting. And so you can read the label. The label is going to tell you what PPE you should have. And if it says, you know, minimum like long pants, long sleeves, you just need to know that in California, that also means chemical resistant gloves and protective eyewear. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so when we're thinking about storing pesticides, we obviously need a place to store them, right? So when we think about our storage facility, to keep it simple, basically the three main things that you want to be thinking about protecting when creating your storage facility or setting up your storage facility should be protecting people or living things, so people and animals, the environment, and the pesticides themselves. So keeping that in mind, I'm actually going to go to the next slide. Keeping that in mind, the fact that when we have a storage facility and we want to protect people and animals, we want to protect the environment, and we want to protect the pesticides, we are going to launch our third poll. And I just want to see what you all think would be some characteristics of a proper pesticide storage facility. So the question asks, what are some characteristics of a proper pesticide storage facility? And again, you can choose all that apply. We have, it's lockable, so you can lock it up and no one but people with the key or the access code can get in. It has to be dry, has to be temperature controlled. It will offer PPE storage. It will have a sign with the signal words danger or warning, and it will offer storage for personal employee items. So what do you all think are the characteristics of a proper pesticide storage facility? Poll. Oh, you can see, I'll see that. Okay. So yes, so in this poll, the correct answers, I guess you could say, were that it's lockable, that it's dry, it's temperature controlled, and then it has signs with the signal words warning and danger. Oh. So it's going to be lockable, it's going to be dry, and the only two things that it should never have are it should never offer PPE storage, and it should never offer employees their personal item storage. And that's because we don't want any like cross-contamination, and we don't want people getting PPE or pesticides spilled on their PPE. Yes, Joseph, I see your question, and I'm actually going to get to that in just a minute. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so when we talk about one aspect of a pesticide storage facility, we want to protect people or animals, right? So in the section 6672 of California Code of Regulations, in categories 1 and 2, which it's a lot, but basically it says that you must always have pesticides and their empty containers in a locked area, or if you can't have them in a locked area, they have to be under the supervision of someone who like can always have them like the pesticides in their site, and that no one's going to be able to get to them and open them or mess with them while they're under watch of someone else. And so if you have, so that's for pesticides that are in like the smaller containers, but if you have like a big 55-gallon drum with pesticides, you can just have it should just have like a lock on it so that no one can open it, or so that no one can open it and use that pesticide, because obviously that's a big drum and that's a little bit harder to move or manipulate, and so putting a locked enclosure on that as well works. So we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so your pesticide storage area should also be posted with signs. This is also in the Code of Regulations that look a lot like the signs that I have posted on the screen right here. So they should be all around the storage area, and they should have the words danger or warning. They should say something along the lines of poison storage area, all unauthorized people should stay out, and always keep the door locked when not in use. So the one on the right, the red one that says danger, and it's got the 2 skull and crossbones, that's a really good example of what type of sign you should have on your storage area. And also the one on the left is as well, but obviously the one on the right has a bit more information, and I'm always a fan of over communicating. And so that's a good option. And the skull and crossbones, I think, helps because it shows people like, don't mess around. This is really toxic or dangerous. Don't come near here. So, but you do have to have the requirements that say danger or warning, and it has to be readable within 25 feet. So if you're within 25 feet of the building and the sign, you should be able to read this sign and what it says. All right, so I'm gonna go to the next one. Okay, so when you're like I said earlier, when you're thinking about how you design or set up your pesticide storage facility, you want to design it in a way that protects people, it protects the environment, and it's going to protect the pesticides. So I'm getting to, I believe it was Joseph and Jose's questions about temperature control. Thank you for posting those questions in the chat. So when I say temperature controlled, at the very least, the storage facility should be insulated. So as you'll see in this picture, it's got that like shiny metallic stuff around it. That's insulation. And that's just going to help keep it from getting too hot or too cold. And ideally, you would have a really nice facility that might have access to air conditioning or a heater. And I don't know if it gets cold enough here in California to need a heater. And so that's what I mean by temperature control, is what either having at least insulation within to keep the temperature at a reasonably regular temperature, or having like some sort of heater or an air conditioner. And so we do that because this is the point of protecting the pesticides. So if the pesticides get exposed to too high of temperatures or too low of temperatures, they can break down or degrade a lot faster, and they might not be usable. And you might just have wasted a bunch of money on pesticides that are now you can't use because they got too hot and no longer work. So you also should have a pesticide storage facility that is well ventilated and that's not going to have a lot of direct sunlight in it. And so as you can see here in this one, there's a little fan at the back, and hopefully that fan is directing the air to an outside source. So ideally, when you have ventilation, you don't want the air from inside the storage facility seeping out into offices or into someone's home or somewhere that people are going to be exposed to possibly toxic fumes. And so you want it well ventilated so that when your handlers go in to pick out the pesticides or to grab the pesticides, they aren't inhaling a bunch of fumes that have just kind of built up in there. And then no direct sunlight, again, that's to protect the pesticides so they don't get damaged or degrade, because we all know how intense the sun can be in California. So those are some things to think about. And then you also want to make sure that you are preventing water damage. So if you have pesticides that are in paper or cardboard, those should be off the floor. And so that if water comes in somehow, there's a flood or something happens, a spill, they don't get wet and then get clumpy or again, damaged. So thinking about what kind of containers you have. Again, like if you have a big metal gallon container, that should be just lifted up off the floor so that it won't get rusted if there's water that continually is leaking in. So then it should, your facility should also be well lit so that handlers can clearly see and read the pesticide labels, or they can notice those spills and leaks that could damage your pesticides. Because it's no fun. I'm sure you've all been up at 3 a.m. in your kitchen trying to get like a glass of water and you stub your toe and it's not fun. So just imagine that sort of situation, but with pesticides, and maybe they're spilling on you. Who knows what's happening, but it's always best to think about how well you can see in your storage facility. And again, and another, I see we have a comment from Robert. It is not that they're when pesticides, okay, so Robert says when pesticides are improperly stored, they lose efficacy. It is not that they're disposed of, they are used to a lesser effect. There are, as you know, a myriad of problems associated with this scenario. Yes, Robert, thank you. So when they're improperly stored, they lose their efficacy, and then, you know, that could mean, you know, you're losing money, or it's damage to your crops, or something along those lines. So, and then going back to the pesticide facility, the storage facility, the floor should also be non-porous. So ideally, again, if you spill a pesticide, it should be on like a concrete floor or something like that that's not going to absorb that pesticide, because that's a lot easier to clean up. Where if you spill on dirt, that seeps into the ground, and that's going to be a lot harder to clean up. And that could create a more dangerous storage facility for your handlers in the future. So really the only thing that you should have in a storage facility are the pesticides and a spill kit. And we're going to go a little bit more into that in just a minute. So when you are thinking of your pesticide storage facility, again, you should just have the shelves for the pesticides, the spill kit. You shouldn't be having any sort of employee personal items or PPE. Those should be stored in a separate area to protect the employees. Okay, so you kind of know, or you know what your storage facility should look like. So now thinking about the actual chemicals and the actual pesticides that are in that facility, how can we store those appropriately and safely so that you're protecting yourselves, you're protecting the environment, and you're protecting them so that they don't lose efficacy, like what Robert mentioned earlier to us all. So I think we say this in almost every webinar, the label is the law. So read your label, your pesticide label, and it's going to tell you how to appropriately store your pesticide. So I believe that's in the storage section of the label. Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong. But so you can find it on the label, and it's going to tell you how to store your pesticides. But in general, when you're putting these in your pesticide or your storage facility, yeah, Lisa, do you want to jump in really fast?
I just wanted to say, yeah, I mean, there aren't always like really specific instructions. You have to know the basics, which Sarah is telling you. But if there's like a specific, more narrow temperature range for storage, or if there's special considerations, so you'll find a lot of boilerplate language on storage and disposal, and that's usually at the end of the label. But certainly there might be a temperature beyond which you shouldn't store it listed, or any kind of special considerations. But for storage, it's really general information for almost all pesticides, and then anything specific will be also added to the general language on the label.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so for right now, I'm just going to talk about sort of the general recommendations for storing pesticides. But again, like Lisa said, you know, read your label, and it's going to tell you specifically like what temperature it should be stored at, or any other specifics. So in general, you should be checking all of your pesticide containers for any like leaks or breaks or weak spots, because obviously that's going to create a problem. You're going to have leaking pesticides everywhere, and no one wants that. It's dangerous. You're going to probably lose money because you're going to have to buy more. So, you know, either if you're the boss, you should know about this. If you're an employee, you should be telling your boss about this so that you can fix it. So you can either, if that's the case, you know, you can transfer that pesticide to a service container, which Maria is going to give a presentation on service containers at a later date, or you can put it into a larger container that's going to hold all the pesticide or the spill. So like you'll see in the picture, we have these pesticide containers in bigger plastic tubs. So if something breaks or spills, it's sort of like a containment system and it's not all over the place and you're spending your whole day cleaning up a pesticide spill. So you should know that you never should store pesticides in any unmarked containers or in any food containers. They should always be marked really clearly with the pesticide name, the EPA registration number, and like the percentage of active ingredient. So they shouldn't just be laying around and everyone's questioning like, oh, hey, Jim, what's this pesticide? Like if you're questioning what it is, that's not proper storage. You should be very aware of what it is. And again, no food containers. That is not allowed. And it is very, very dangerous. I'm sure you all know that. And also you want to make sure that the containers are tightly closed and they're stored upright. So honestly, when I think about storing pesticides or storing in a storage facility, I don't know, I kind of think of like when you're at grandma's house, she's probably pretty anal about how her kitchen is set up. So if she wants the sugar container closed, you better close it because she's going to yell at you. So it's really similar to pesticides. You know, think about what you would do if you were at grandma's house or you were visiting a friend or a family member. You know, you want to keep everything nice and clean and closed up tightly, and it's just going to prevent a lot of headache in the future. So, because if you tip over a pesticide container and it's open, it's going to spill everywhere. So, and then again, it's always good practice to have them in a like double container. So they're going to be in their original container, and then you're going to store them in a plastic tub. So if a spill or a crack happens, you just catch it in the plastic container. And if you have pesticide bags, you can put those in sealable Ziploc bags, or like a sealable heavy duty bag so that they stay fresh. They won't lose their efficacy as fast. And again, it's safe. If they spill, it's okay. They're in a bag that's shut and you just pick it up off the floor and you can put it back to where it goes. And then you'll see here, we have like the big 55-gallon drums. You'll see they're on like these big plastic pallets with holes in the bottom. This is really good practice because not only is it going to protect against water if water seeps in and they might rust out, but if there's a spill in one of these, they have a catch container to catch that pesticide before it spills out everywhere. And then again, just to reiterate, you know, your storage facility for pesticides should be just for pesticides. So just the containers, just a spill kit. Anything like food or feed or seed, PPE, personal storage, that needs to be in a separate facility that is not connected at all to your pesticide storage. Okay. So again, with the pesticides, you can see here, this is a pretty good example of pesticide storage. You know, they're on this metal shelving. Granted, they aren't in their own separate tubs, but it's a very well lit pesticide storage facility. You can easily read their labels. And I forgot to mention, if you on every label, you should always be able to see what the name of the pesticide is, the signal word. That's what I forgot to mention on the last slide, the EPA registration number and the percentage of the active ingredient. So you should also be noting the shelf life of your pesticides. Like Robert mentioned, you know, they lose efficacy if they're exposed to extreme temperatures, but also if they're outdated, they're not going to work as well. And ideally, you really shouldn't be having any outdated pesticides in your storage facility. You should be just purchasing what you need for the growing season and using them all up because it's cheaper and it's safer because you're not having to maintain pesticides or store them when you're not using them and they're just sitting there waiting for an accident to happen. So ideally, that should be what you do. You should only buy enough for your growing season. However, if you do have pesticides that are past due, we are going to talk about that a little bit later. So, and again, good practice. You should always be cleaning up any spills or leaks right away. And your spill kit should be in the pesticide storage facility with everything else. and it's going to have, something absorbent like kitty litter or clay, maybe activated charcoal, anything like that. And then a shovel, a broom, and some big plastic bags to put the contaminated kitty litter, and you can get rid of it. So we are going to, I guess I'll pause if there are any questions. I don't see any, but I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment or has any questions with what I just said. It was a good chunk of information, but really it's just keep it clean, keep it tight, keep the lids tight, and you should be good to go. So, all right, I'm gonna move on to this. So we're gonna launch poll number 4. All right, so poll number 4, the question is true or false? Your pesticide storage facility must be at least 100 feet from a well. True or false? And actually, while we're answering this poll, I have a question. Thank you for your question. The question is, where would we dispose of the kitty litter? Actually, Lisa, do you want to answer this? I think I know, but I don't want to give out wrong information.
Yeah, I can. So, okay. This is not a perfect system. That is a great question. So you've absorbed this spill and you with kitty litter, and then you put your kitty litter in either a plastic bag that's tied up or in like a hard plastic container that has a lid. And then you can dispose of it that way. Like you could put it in the trash. It's really, to me, that is, I mean, it sort of depends on the quantity of the pesticide, right? If it's a small spill, that's fine, as long as you've got plenty of absorbent material to absorb and deactivate it. But if it's a really large spill, frankly, you need to be calling the ag commissioner or some emergency personnel to help with that. So it sort of depends on the size of your spill. But yeah, I mean, theoretically, if you've dealt with it appropriately, then you can throw that in the trash. So it has to be completely sealed, completely absorbed, completely sealed, and then put in the trash.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And then I think we can share our results from the poll. Okay, thank you. Yes, so it is true. Your pesticide storage facility must be at least 100 feet from a well. I'm gonna move on. Yes, so in section 6609 of California Code of Regulations, I don't know why I read that. You can read it. It's in the regulations, but basically it says that you are prohibited from mixing, loading, or storing pesticides within 100 feet from a well. So basically any type of handling that you're gonna be doing with pesticide should not be within 100 feet of a water source. So whether that's a well, or it's even like a drainage ditch or an abandoned well, like you can go read the regulation, but basically you shouldn't be close to water or in a groundwater source when handling pesticides. And so I have this video for you all. I'm sure you're probably like, okay, 100 feet, that's great, but what does that actually look like? So this is a 100-foot slip and slide. I hope you all can see it. This is how far away you should be from a water source when handling pesticides. And if it will play, there we go. There's the guy just having a good time. So you can imagine this guy is your pesticides just shooting down towards a water source, but they didn't make it to the river because they were 100 feet away from any water source. So I'm going to pause. They had a lot of fun with the video effects in this. They did a lot of, oh, come on. There we go. Oh. No. Okay, there we go. They had a lot of fun with the video effects. Okay, so in the beginning, I said your storage facility, or when you're storing pesticides, you should be thinking about protecting people, the environment, and the pesticides themselves. So we talked about what that would look like and what your storage facility would look like. So I want you all to, in the chat, tell me if the storage facility you see on the screen right now is an example of a good storage facility or a bad storage facility. So I'm going to just wait for you all to put, okay, I see Dana said bad. Okay, bad. Yes. Okay, thank you. That is correct. This is not a good example of a storage facility. So now can anyone post in the chat again? Oh yeah, so James, you kind of did what I want. Post, why is it such a bad example of a storage facility? So I see storing PPE with chemicals. James said, yes, that is not a good thing. You should not be storing PPE in the same place you're storing your pesticides. What else? What else do you think could make this a better storage facility? So Kim says bottles on the ground. Yeah, that's right. They shouldn't be there. Containers on the floor. Personal items are stored. Yes, chemicals on the floor in cardboard. Okay, this is great. Thank you so much. Is that a lunch sack? It better not be, Dana, because we know that's for sure not allowed. Okay, so someone posted in the Q&A, the wood walls are not fireproof. Oh, I didn't think of that, actually. I don't think it's a regulation that you can't have it be wood. I'm sure it's a very good recommendation that you shouldn't have wood walls. But I don't think they can require that from people. So yeah, this is not a good example of a storage facility because you can see there's PPE hanging up on the wall, that we're gonna say that there's a stack on the floor that's a lunch sack that's got food in it for human consumption, maybe animal consumption. None of that is allowed. You have the cardboard containers on the ground and they're not protected. So if water comes in, it's gonna damage that container and it's not gonna be a pretty sight. And yeah, it's just kind of a disaster zone. Like if you were a handler, would you wanna be walking in here and seeing this whole mess of pesticides? Ideally, you would want to be having a nice organized section, be able to read everything really nicely. I do have to say it does seem pretty well lit, so that's a positive for this one. And someone just posted there's no temperature control. That is correct. So you can see it's just wood walls, but there's no insulation. And we're gonna assume there's not a air conditioning unit either. So, okay, so I'm gonna go on to the next one. Now, this one, I want you all to tell me, what do you think? Do you think this is an example of good or bad, a good or bad storage facility? And you can post that in the chat, whether it's good or bad, and why you think it is the good or bad, whatever you decide. So I see one person said good, we see good, better. Okay, I like that. Carlos, you're skeptical. There's always room for improvement. I'm happy about that. Yes, so this we're hoping this is more of an example of a good pesticide storage facility. You know, it looks like it's probably temperature controlled. It's probably got some insulation in those walls. You can see here the door. We're gonna assume that it can be locked. Everything is up off the floor and they're in these nice metal shelves, which is always good to have. You don't want wooden or any type of absorbent material holding your pesticides. You want something that's easy to clean, isn't gonna absorb. You can also see your containers are in little tubs. So if a spill happens, it's gonna pick it up really nicely. And I forgot to mention this earlier, and I'm thinking of it right now. You want your heavy pesticides. You can see all these big boxes. Those are probably the really heavy ones. You want those on the bottom. You don't want to be trying to reach up high and pull something down, because what's going to happen? You're going to grab it. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's too heavy. And it's just going to fall on you. And even if you're wearing PPE, you don't ever want that much pesticide falling on your body.
I want to respond to the high up on the shelf, because I love it that we have like safety people here and not just pesticide safety. Like you guys do OSHA safety too, and it really shows through, because you have to meld those two types of regulations, right? The pesticide regulations don't say one single solitary thing about things being too high up. But you guys know that for earthquake safety and for all other kinds of building safety measures, you know, I think it's above 6 foot. I mean, you can see like above 6 foot, they do have like that, the extra rail. but it is a little high up, especially for pesticides. There's a real rule. It's just a good practice, but I do want to point out that at least it's a DF, so the dry flowable, so the dry is up on top, which is exactly where it should be. So anyway, so yeah, I also want to say something not related to the webinar. If you're on your phone, email me and tell me who you are. I put a link in the chat, but we'll talk later. Just don't leave without telling me who you are, because I just have your phone number and I don't have an identity from there. I'm not big brother, I'm little sister. So anyways.
Okay. So I'm going to move on. I see some really great conversation and chatter in the chat. And once we're done with the webinar, maybe we can talk more about this, but I'm going to continue on just for the sake of time. So, finishing up, when you're handling pesticides, always remember you want to clean your equipment and you want to store your pesticides properly before you move on to a different application job. Because again, your pesticides should be locked or under supervision of someone at all times. And if you just kind of leave your equipment, even though it's empty, it still has pesticide residue on it, that's considered a pesticide container, and that's considered a hazard. And also the same thing goes with your pesticides. So always lock them away, store them properly before you move on to a different application job. And okay, so the basics of pesticide storage, basically you should only have pesticides in a spill kit. You should never be smoking in a pesticide storage facility. It should be able to be locked. You want all your containers to be closed. You should never have food, feed, or PPE. So I'm just gonna jump right on to the next one. So now we're going to talk about how to safely transport pesticides. Okay, thank you. So poll number 5 asks, true or false, when transporting pesticides, it is okay to transport them in the cab of your vehicle? I see a lot of fast responses. Right. And okay, thank you. Yes. So it's false. You should, when transporting pesticides, it's really not okay to be transporting them in the cab of your vehicle. And so I'm going to go to the next slide and we can close the poll. I'm going to go to the next slide and talk about why that is not okay. So ideally, you should never be carrying pesticides in the cab or like the passenger section of your vehicle. Really, you should be carrying pesticides in vehicles that look similar to the vehicles that I have on this page. So something that is separate from where all the passengers are sitting. And like this truck, it has a topper that you can lock, and it's not going to be anywhere near humans, and it's going to be safe. And it's just a lot safer that way. And again, these other two options are like that. And ideally, you shouldn't be transporting pesticides in a personal vehicle. So you should have a work vehicle that looks something like this, and they should have that option to like lock the pesticides away and keep the humans and the pesticides separate from each other. So basically, you don't want to carry pesticides because we all know they're toxic. You have to wear PPE. So if you're in the cab of a truck with them or in a car, those fumes, or if there's a spill that happens, they could potentially expose you, and then your workday's ruined. You go to the doctor because you got exposed to pesticides. It's just not a good idea. And also, if they leak, it could get into the carpet and then have more long-term exposure. And yes, Carlos, or if you get in a wreck, and there's just pesticides flying around everywhere, that's just adding insult to injury. You've already probably been injured in a car accident, and now you're having a pesticide exposure incident, and that is not good. And we all know pesticides are really difficult to remove or to clean up, and they could possibly be like impossible to get out of your fabric of your car seat. So if you absolutely have to, if you almost have to store pesticides in something like the mystery machine or a truck like this, obviously if it's in a truck like this, it's not lockable. So if it's not lockable, your only other option is to have someone be responsible for keeping their eye on them at all times. And they should be tied down so they can't move around. So if you're turning a corner, they're not sliding this way and you're going that way. It's like that game you play with your siblings where you turn a corner and they all slam into the side and squish you into the door. You don't want to play that game with your pesticides. So they should be tied down. Someone should be watching them if you have to be carrying them in a vehicle without a topper. So then if you're in a van, perhaps, I don't know what type of transport your employer provides, but let's say they decide to buy the mystery machine one day from the Scooby-Doo gang, and you have to be transporting pesticides. You could put a barrier between the passenger compartment and where you're storing the pesticides. And again, strap them down, put them in a separate container so that if there's a leak or something, it'll capture that leak. Make sure they're not going to move, and then make sure you really ventilate the area so you're getting tons of airflow and you're not breathing in those toxic fumes. But ideally, you shouldn't have to deal with pesticide transport in either of these vehicles. You should have something like this, where you can put it back, lock it up, and for lack of a better word, forget about it until you get to where you're going. Okay, so basically, when you're transporting pesticides, you want to apply the same principles as to how you would handle pesticides in your storage facility. So you want to make sure they're upright. You want to make sure they're closed. Definitely, it'd be nice to put them in another container so that if something happens, it's there to pick up the spill, and then make sure they're lockable. So if you're transporting pesticides, put them in something lockable, like you see in the picture of the guy. He's got that lock box. He's putting them in, and clearly you can see you've seen all these before. They have a key and it opens it, and it just keeps them safe. So that's another option if you don't have a topper. If you have a topper, make sure the topper is lockable, because let's say you stop at a gas station and you go to the bathroom, someone could come and steal your pesticides, or I don't know, do something with them, some nefarious individual who knows what they would do. But so again, whoever's driving the car or whoever transporting the pesticides, they are responsible. And so whether that means they're locked, that's the ideal recommendation, or if someone always has their eyes on them and is always watching them to make sure that they're not going to be stolen or broken into, or et cetera, et cetera. So yes, they need to be secured, and ideally they would be tied down so they're not moving and shifting around during transit, because even if you're a careful driver, things move, things get crazy on the road. So they should be upright, they should be stable, and they should not be in the same compartment as people or animals. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one. Okay, so I'm gonna just jump to how do we dispose of unused pesticides. And again, if there's any questions about transporting, feel free to put them in the chat and we can answer them later. But so ideally, I'm going to start out, ideally you should not have to dispose of pesticides, because you will only buy enough for the growing season and you're going to be using them all within the time frame of your growing season, and you're not going to have bought any extra. So not only is that safer, but it's also economically a lot more logical, because you're not buying extra and dumping it. But things happen. People aren't always the best at math. I'm not very good at math. So if you have unused pesticide, or it's outdated, or you're just never going to use it, it's old, whatever, how do you dispose of it? So you should never, ever, ever, ever put it in the trash or pour it down the drain or pour it on the ground. Pesticides are considered hazardous materials, and they should really be treated as such. So you would never just put a hazardous material in the trash, or you'd never just pour it down the drain, It's like they say, you can't put your medicines down the drain. You really can't be doing that with pesticides either. So if it's just like a pesticide concentrate, again, always follow the label. The label is going to tell you how to dispose of it. You can also contact your county ag commissioner. They have endless amounts of resources dealing with this stuff. They could find someone to take it off your hands for you. They are going to have the most accurate resources for you And there is the option possibly of returning it to the manufacturer and then they can dispose of it themselves. But I would definitely say contact your county ag commissioner. They're going to have a lot of info. And if it's already diluted and it's ready to roll, like it's in its backpack sprayer and you don't know what to do with it, the best thing to do is to just use it up, but obviously on a crop that it's label approved for. So you can't use pesticides. It's illegal to use a pesticide that's not in compliance with what the label says. But if you have a crop and it's in compliance with the label, just use it up, and if that's feasible. If not, again, follow the label. It's going to tell you how to dispose of it properly, return it to the manufacturer, or contact your county ag commissioner. But if it's already been diluted and you just have a little bit left, make sure you're following the label, but just use it up on a crop that you can. So, okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about triple rinsing. And so this poll's asking, when are you required to triple rinse a pesticide container? And so I actually want to change the language a little bit. It should be, when should you triple rinse a pesticide container? So whenever you have the chance, at the end of every workday, or immediately after you empty the container. So what do you all think? Yes, so that is correct. You should, whenever you triple rinse a pesticide container, you should do it immediately after you empty it. It's easier, and if you haven't triple rinsed it, it's still considered hazardous waste because it still contains pesticide, and it's just a lot more of a pain to deal with. So triple rinsing is how you clean the pesticide containers and prep them for disposal. And it just makes a lot of sense. You can use the wastewater to put back into your tank to then use to spray on your crops. So yes, you should be triple rinsing immediately after you empty your pesticide container. So like I said, is right there. So again, you can follow the label on how to triple rinse. On the next slide, I'll give you a quick overview of how to do that. But if it's a closed mixing system, it's going to do the rinsing for you. And it's really pretty simple. There should be no excuse to not be triple rinsing right after, especially with a closed mixing system, because it's so simple. So if you don't have a closed mixing system though, this is how you're going to triple rinse. So if you have a container, a pesticide container that's more than 5 gallons, you want to fill it about 1/5 of the way full or 20% full with water. And if it's 5 gallons or less, you want to fill it about 1/4 of the way with water. And so basically, you're just going to fill it with water. Also, well, to start, you should be wearing the appropriate PPE, so label the required PPE. You fill it with the right amount of water, and then you're going to close it super tight, and you're going to roll it, you're going to shake it, make sure you get all the insides cleaned up, and then you're going to pour all of that rinse water, is what they call it, into your mix tank so that you can use it to apply your pesticide or use it as part of the water for your pesticide. And then you have to repeat that 2 more times. So that's why I call it triple rinsing. You have to do that 3 times before your container is considered triple rinsed and ready for disposal. So once you triple rinse, you should also be putting a hole in your container so that it can't be used for anything else and that can only be used for, sorry, I see a Q&A. I will get to the Q&A in just a minute. But yeah, you should be putting a hole in the container so that it can't be used again and that you can only dispose of it. Okay, so I'm gonna skip this poll and I'm just gonna go straight into pesticide container disposal. So after you've triple rinsed your container, you're gonna poke a hole in it so it can't be used. And then what do you do with your containers after that, right? So what you should be doing is you should return them to a secure storage facility. So basically, like your storage facility for pesticides, that's where it should be going. You're going to store it there until they can be disposed of properly. So you can talk with your county ag commissioner for how you can dispose of them. And registrants, pesticide registrants are actually required and I believe we can post a link to this in the chat, but they are required to at least establish or participate in a pesticide container recycling program. So once it's triple rinsed, you can toss it in the trash and forget about it. But really what you should be doing is recycling them because again, we're trying to protect the environment. Part of this is how can we store, transport, and dispose of pesticides and protect the environment. And recycling is one way that we can do that. So you can return your empty containers to a secure storage site. So something like your pesticide storage facility, because they do still contain trace amounts of pesticide and should not be available for people to just pick up and touch and mess with. And then you can talk with your county ag commissioner for disposal options. And I believe most county ag commissioners, probably depends on which county you're in, they offer recycling events where you can bring in your containers and recycle them, and they can call a company that I'm actually going to go to the next slide. I don't know if this is the one that everyone uses, but this is a really good option. It's Interstate Ag Plastics. So they will come and pick up your triple rinse pesticide containers and recycle them for you at no cost. But there are certain criteria you have to meet. So you can first chat with your county ag commissioner and they might give you some options on how to recycle, but you can also contact this company and ask them for help on recycling your triple rinse containers. But they do have requirements and those are right here. So I think someone said something about removing the label. Yeah, so your container should just be the plastic. And you can see here, they should be cleaned. And if they're stained, that's okay. They just don't want like dried pesticide residues hanging out in the containers or on the outside of the container. But there should be no label. It should be triple rinsed and cleaned. And it cannot have the container lid on it either. And so if you want more information on that, you can go to their website, Interstate Ag Plastics, and they have a ton of info. Due to time, I'm not going to talk about that, but that is a very good option to dispose of pesticides. So pesticide bags, it depends on your county, but you can burn them. Talk with your county ag commissioner. There are every county deals with pesticide bags differently. So you can throw them away. If they're properly emptied, you can just throw them away. And so I'm not going to go into a ton of a detail, but I don't believe there's a recycling program for pesticide bags, but once they're properly emptied, you can throw them away or talk to your county ag commissioner for other options for dealing with disposing of pesticide bags. Okay, so the take-home messages from today. Always, always, always wear the label required PPE when handling pesticides in their containers. When you're storing, transporting, disposing, always wear PPE. And remember that California has extra minimum PPE that you should be wearing. And proper storage areas should protect people, animals, the environment, and also the pesticide. And simple rule of thumb is when you're transporting pesticides, follow really similar regulations that you follow with your storage facility. You should always be triple rinsing your pesticide containers immediately after you empty them. And, so you're not having to dispose of unused pesticides, only buy what you need for your growing season. So I'm going to move to the next slide. We're running a little out of time. So if you have any questions, you can contact Lisa at lblecker@UCANR, or you can contact the whole pesticide safety team, or you can tweet at us. We have a lot of options, but here's some contact info for you all. And then again, you can go to our IPM website and there's a ton of resources on there. There's videos and there's notes and other webinars that you can find and get more information. And then again, we have this book, Safe and Effective Use of Pesticides, you can use as well.